What's going on, everyone? Spring training baseball is here. Most of you who will probably be listening to this show right now are watching the Dodgers play their first spring training game as Yoshinobu Yamamoto is about to make his first pitch at Camelback Ranch against the Chicago Cubs. So here we are. Baseball season is here. Um, Baseball season is here, and this is Kevin Klein speaking. Most of you are getting ready for your fantasy baseball drafts, and I want to do something different with the Incline Dodgers this season. So I have consulted a fantasy baseball expert. Vlad Sedler is here. You can follow his work on FTN Fantasy and make sure to follow him on social media at RotoGut. What's going on, Vlad? You're a Dodgers fan as well. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. You just mentioned the first pitch, Kevin. It's great time of year for a lot of us crazies who have been researching and doing projections and drafting since November, like pretty much since the World Series ended. It's nice to have some real actionable news, see stuff going on, with training camp, and get some real baseball.
Yeah, so Vlad's been doing this for a very long time, and not to say he's old, but in terms
Mhm.
of he has a lot of expertise. And so I wanted to make sure to get him on this show and help prep you guys, especially for your Los Angeles Dodgers, because this Dodgers team is loaded. And I don't know if the fantasy strategy is to just go after Los Angeles Dodgers. Probably not in certain departments, which we're going to get into. But I wanted to kick off the show with the big three: Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. So, Vlad, in the drafts that you're seeing, kind of how is it laying out with those three right now?
Yeah, I mean, Shohei Ohtani is basically the number one overall pick and this is in standard roto leagues, category leagues. In points leagues, it's mostly Ohtani. You might see a little Judge mixed in there as well. But a lot of the sort of the high stakes community, I've seen a lot of Bobby Witt Jr. taken first overall. I think there might be just slight concerns with Ohtani. I think people were really burned last year by Ronald Acuna Jr., who was the consensus first overall pick, and he just got hurt. And obviously, that's not something we can predict. But just between the coming back to pitch and the elbow and just little things like that, there are some reasons why people have been going Bobby Witt just for a little bit more like safety security. But I think most people recognize that you're not going to get the type of legendary fantasy performance. I mean, 50-50 is just, it's insane. The numbers Ohtani put up last year, and he's still only 30. If he's healthy and rocking, he can easily be the number one overall. So that's there. And then Mookie Betts is usually going somewhere in the teens. I was in a draft recently where he fell to me at 15, which I really felt like was a steal. That's like at the end of the first round of a 15-teamer. And then Freddie, we can dive into in a little bit whenever you want, because I got some thoughts about him. But he's basically going in the 20s.
Okay.
In some cases, gets to like pick 30. So I think there's some good opportunities there.
So to kind of go back to these three players we were just talking about. So Shohei Ohtani, I think it varies on the league. Like if you're in Yahoo, you have to draft the hitter and the pitcher. I don't remember which leagues you get best of both worlds. I'm guessing if you get Shohei Ohtani as both the hitter and the pitcher, it makes it harder to resist drafting him
Yeah.
first overall. Is that kind of the right thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if in those type of leagues where you get Ohtani for both, you've got really a natural advantage. Obviously, you're going to want to play him most of the season as a hitter, but there will be weeks when he's back and he's grooving, and he's say you see a good start from him, and then you see he lines up for 2 starts in a week in weekly leagues, and maybe it's the middle of the summer and your pitching stats are hurting, but your hitting stats are fine. That's a good opportunity to use Ohtani as a pitcher. So there's a lot of strategy involved, but you'd be surprised how many people actually consider it a headache and not an advantage. They're like, oh man, this is too hard. I don't want to deal with, when do I play him here or there? I say embrace it. You get an opportunity like that. You don't look to give horse in the mouth.
And then you just mentioned Mookie Betts kind of falling into the teens, which to me is a little interesting because I feel like when healthy, especially the last 2 or maybe 3 seasons, he's pretty much been objectively a top five, yeah, fantasy baseball player in the sport. And with the positional flexibility, now he's going to be listed as a shortstop. Maybe it's not so much an advantage this year, because baseball does have some pretty good hitting shortstops as opposed to maybe a few years ago. I don't know if he still has second base eligibility, but with Mookie Betts not just being an outfielder, I guess you could say, I feel like there's still a lot of value in getting Mookie Betts in the first round if you want to make that jump.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was just in a wild amount of value with all three of these guys if they stay healthy. Really, that's the key, and that's something that we can't predict. Of course, Mookie Betts last year only played in 116 games. He put up incredible stats just in those games. If you were to basically prorate it for a full season, he would have again been a top 5 guy. And the previous season, the guy hit almost 40 home runs and scored 126 runs, and he's still stealing bases. He stole 16 bags last year. So, I do my own projections for the site for FTN. It's called VDP, and Mookie Betts is, he's popping up there, but we do have a little bit of a cut on the plate appearances. You just figure with age, a little bit, probably miss some time here and there. He's not really that old, for baseball. He's 32. He's healthy. He's part of this lineup. He's got to be pumped. And I think there might be a surprise with people making a profit on somebody like Mookie Betts.
All right. And then the last one, which I do think it's a little worth diving into for a couple minutes. Freddie Freeman had a monster World Series, showed the world what he can really do in the big stage. But when you're thinking regular season, it has to be a little bit of a different mindset. And in the last few years, Freddie Freeman, every season, consistent Hall of Fame bat. You get him as your first baseman, you're pretty happy with the fantasy output. I do have some concerns, and I think this is where your expertise comes into play. It sounds like Freddie Freeman, because of the offseason surgeries and the injuries he just had to deal with, he's going to be pretty limited in spring training this current season, and that may play effect coming into the regular season. He may come out of the gates a little slow. Who knows? He's a specimen. He's one of a kind, so he might just pick up where he left off. But any thoughts on Freddie Freeman eventually hitting that regression stage? With Miguel Cabrera, I feel like it came out of nowhere. And I'm not saying that's what we're going to see with Freeman, but he's 35, 36 now. You have to start to think in the back of your head, the tail off will start to come.
Yeah, I mean, it'll come eventually. I think it really just comes down to health. And I think if, he is starting off the season a little slow, I think it's okay for the Dodgers to take it easy with him. And maybe you don't expect much in the beginning, but if you're getting a full healthy 5 months out of Freddie Freeman, I mean, this is one of the most consistent baseball players and fantasy producers. I mean, over the last decade, since 2017, there's no player in baseball that's got a higher batting average. It's 309. I mean, Luis Arias, but he wasn't even playing back in 2017. League wide, second in runs, fourth in RBI. Guys like him and Jose Ramirez are pretty much the only ones that are returning, first round or top 20 overall value like every single season. And there's a lot to be said for that. And, he's going to be pumped up for this team. They just won a championship. They want to do it again. They added all these, these great arms, added Conforto and Edman. So, man, I would just be shocked if the offensive or the production falls out in that regard this season. And then also there's the element of like what you're giving up by drafting somebody like Freddie Freeman, who's a second or third round pick. Like, for example, he's in an ADP range right next to Bryce Harper. And we know Harper has had his share of injuries and ding ups. He's always, find some reason to miss time and hasn't even driven in 100 runs in several years. So if I'm looking between those two, I'm always going to go with Freeman. And that's even Dodger bias aside.
Fair enough. I think that's a very valid argument right there. Let's get into the next tier of Dodgers hitters. You've got your Teoscar Hernandez, Will Smith, Tommy Edman, and then a guy that sounds like he's going to break camp, probably in the lineup every day, and Ha-Seong Kim. Thoughts on any of those hitters? Anyone that sticks out to you that you feel is undervalued, someone you should get in your fantasy baseball lineups if they're available at the right price? And then we might go the other direction after that. Anyone you're kind of hesitant on and you might be fading?
Well, I do like Ha-Seong Kim very much for the price, and this isn't for everyone because a lot of you out there might be playing in 10-team leagues. He doesn't really factor into that format. And then in 12-team leagues where the player pool is usually about 360 players, I mean, he's got an ADP of 380. So you could take him with your last pick, and this is NFBC ADP that we're using. So he's mostly for 15-team guy, but my projections are a lot higher on the market, I think, than a lot of public ones you'll see out there, because I think maybe there'll be a little bit of a ramp up period, but this guy is excellent defensively. Right now they've got him slated to platoon, probably in the bottom of the lineup. But if his defense is really all it's we expect out of him, he's going to be playing a lot more, because otherwise, what are you going to do? You're not going to put Kike at second base, or you try not to, right?
Yeah.
Kim can play third. He can platoon with Muncy over there. He can play in the outfield. He's got speed. He steals bases. So, it's a very strong strategy to always you follow where the runs are coming. So, the Dodgers, Braves, Astros, Phillies, you just target those players that people don't know a lot about when they're cheap, and then you could potentially make a nice profit with them. I think Kim is one of those guys.
Yeah, I feel like I'm higher on Kim, and just talking from a baseball perspective, not so much just fantasy, just in general, than maybe the average Dodger fan right now. I don't expect Kim to have a great batting average. 230 to 250 is probably the range of outcome I'm expecting. We'll see how he does in terms of walk clip. Maybe he gets on base a lot by drawing walks, but I think if he does get on base, you could pretty much pencil him in anywhere from 25 to 35 stolen bases. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. And then, like you said, with the Dodgers offense being so potent, he should be able to put up between 70 to 80 runs scored, I would guess, just based off his speed alone. You will be taking probably a hit with home runs. He may not even surpass 6. We'll see with that. RBIs might be limited as well, especially being in the 9 hole, which we're projecting. But overall, I do like the analysis on Kim. He could be a great late draft sleeper guy you could get into your lineup.
Well, the other thing, by the way, and I'm sorry, but with Kim is, he's been one of the best contact hitters in the KBO for many years, and obviously he's stepping up to a much stronger league. But he was a 304 career guy for over since 2017 there in the KBO. 326 last year, 335. I don't think anyone's expecting him to hit 300, but I think we might be surprised with possibly a good average.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then the other guys, Teoscar Hernandez, all-star. You showed me a sheet. Looks like you can get him anywhere. I think people were getting as aggressive as in the 30s, I think I saw. Average probably more like 50 to 60s, it looked like. Seems pretty fair for him. What are your thoughts on Max Muncy? He seems to be dealing with injuries more often than not later in his career. Is Muncy a guy you're targeting, or you think maybe fade?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the fantasy fandom, this is in fantasy, you got to be able to separate the fandom from, what we're doing here, especially if you're doing money leagues and higher money leagues. And the fact of the matter is there are a lot of issues with Max Muncy. I mean, first of all, if you're playing in any league that incorporates batting average as a category, you're usually getting a huge hit there. I mean, he's since the pandemic, he's got like a 220 batting average, which is well below average, league average. And it really hurts. In OBP leagues, it's a little different, or in points leagues, obviously the guy is elite on walks, but big BA drain, and he might even platoon. It's always possible. He's never been he hits lefties well, so that's usually hasn't been an issue, but the Dodgers have some flexibility there. So, he's just not the same power guy that he once was. But he did hit 35 homers or more in 4 of 6 seasons, was, pretty elite. And then with Teoscar, it's, he's high priced, right? He's going 4th, 5th rounds, like you mentioned, around 60 ADP. You're getting solid production. It's just a matter of how you're building your roster, right? If you just need a little bit of everything, you need some power, runs, RBI. You're hitting 4th in the Dodgers lineup. You can drive in 100 runs in your sleep. It's a really good place to be. So I'm good with him. And then Will Smith he's interesting. He's kind of in that 2nd, 3rd tier of catchers. and he's very projectable. Like, so his projections are always very tied to his playing time. He's always playing between 125, 135 games. He's always getting runs and RBIs in the 70s, 20-ish homers. And so I don't really see an issue with him. I did a catcher tiers article not too long ago where I really dug in on him, and obviously Austin Barnes being there isn't a problem. Maybe Dalton Rushing becomes one at some point. But Will Smith is also kind of like a dichotomy as a catcher, because he's elite at getting would-be base stealers out, but he's the worst pitch framer in the league the last 2 seasons. So a little bit of good and bad there.
Makes sense to me. Any other hitters you feel worth mentioning, or did we kind of cover the relevant Dodgers for 2025?
One more, Michael Conforto. He's going like in the mid 200s, and the guy had a 12% barrel rate, 20 home runs in less than 500 plate appearances for San Francisco last year, half the games in that awful park. And he's going to come to LA probably like already super pumped and motivated. Like there's just this something that you can't kind of quantify in fantasy, or you can by adding the stats. But when you join a team like this, and the infectious sort of like magic and the run production, they're turning the lineup over and over. This is too good of a deal that you're getting from a guy like Conforto there in the mid 200. So he might really surprise and blow out all his projections out of the water.
Maybe another, different trajectory, but maybe the next Riley Green, which is what I think of. Obviously different stages in their career, but Riley Green was very late in the drafts last season. I took him, he flourished. Now he's probably way up there in the draft board. I haven't really examined it yet, but that's one name I think of.
Yeah. Riley Green's awesome. That sucks for him that he's just stuck in, that ballpark in Detroit. But yeah, he's going like at pick 100. And man, if you put him on the Dodgers, he'd be going like, well ahead of Teoscar probably.
Damn. All right. This is where I get frustrated, confused, and kind of lost in fantasy baseball. Pitchers in general drive me nuts with the amount of injuries that just seem to flourish and derail a lot of our seasons. Dodgers specifically have a strategy, per se, where they're going to limit guys' innings. On top of that, they get crippled by a massive amount of injuries. We saw that last year in previous seasons. Going into 2025, though, the Dodgers rotation obviously stacked. You've got the new guys with Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki. You got Yoshinobu Yamamoto, year 2. Tyler Glasnow expected to be ready for opening day and should be in the forefront of the rotation. And then, of course, on the back end, Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, Bobby Miller. So we'll get into all that, and eventually Shohei Ohtani, but we already talked about him. Overall, high level, Dodgers pitchers, how do you approach it in a fantasy baseball draft?
Yeah, I think you have to be an active manager, fantasy manager to, first of all, it's a great thing to acquire Dodger pitchers, because first of all, they themselves are collecting, the elite of elite. I mean, this could be the best staff of all time. We know the history with them being able to keep guys healthy, and the long-standing joke is they have the 10 best starters ever to begin the season, and then you're starting no offense, hope he doesn't listen, Ben Kasparius in the playoffs. So and so that's something they want to avoid this year. So it's a little bit of a pain for fantasy, because you are going to get maybe the phantom IL stints and rest days. And when they do eventually go to a 6-man rotation, which we assume will happen when Shohei Ohtani joins it, you're just not going to have those 2 start weeks as much. But it doesn't matter. You're starting Blake Snell every week. You're starting Yamamoto every week. It doesn't matter. It's just a good thing to have. And one of the most, I think, important things in roto fantasy baseball are the ratios, ERA and WHIP. They are very scarce. It's very few guys that are getting you a ERA under 3.15 or a WHIP under like 1.1, and all these guys are capable of that. And it's incredibly valuable. So if you have that sort of that anchor, to kind of help weigh down, closer to 0 your ratios, it's just good, because we're all going to get blown up by our pitchers in fantasy. And if you have a little bit of that depth with those kind of guys, it'll kind of help you stay in the mix in those 2 categories, ERA and WHIP.
All right. So this is where you can challenge me or whatever. If I was doing a draft right now and I had to pick one, I'd probably take Blake Snell first from a fantasy baseball perspective. Obviously, I don't know what he looks like at this moment in time, but if I'm going off the second half of last season, he was pitching at a Cy Young pace. He was
Hmm.
phenomenal for the Giants, and obviously, he's going to take a big load for the Dodgers this season. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is probably the next in line that I'm very high on. When he was healthy, he was elite. He's already looking like a Cy Young contender. The issue is he obviously had the injury, which kept him out 3 months. And going into 2025, you kind of have to ask yourself, how much are the Dodgers going to be willing to push this guy? Maybe they
Hmm.
want to keep his innings down, have him available for October. Then it gets interesting with Glasnow and Sasaki, both when healthy are elite, some of the best. Sasaki hasn't proven it yet at the major league level, but for all
Hmm.
intents and purposes, we expect him to be elite out of the gate. My only concern is he may have an injury pop up that we don't know about. There's been talks that he may have needed Tommy John surgery in the past, but they avoided that, and he seems to be fine now. Then he asked teams about the fastball, why it was diminishing in velocity. Dodgers gave him the best answer. And then there's Tyler Glasnow. When healthy, he's an all-star, no-brainer, ace of the rotation. He just hasn't been able to do it yet and pitch like over 120 innings and make himself available half the time in the second half when you need him.
Yeah, I mean, and you named them pretty much in the way that they're going in the draft market. So Glasnow is usually going somewhere around 40, Yamamoto around 60, and then Sasaki and Glasnow around 100 overall. And that also is kind of proportionate to like innings expectations, even to my model, the VDP models expectations, where you've got Snell for about 150, 160 innings, Yamamoto 140, 150, and then Glasnow, you just always expect something to pop up. So he's always in the, 110 to 130 range. And then Sasaki's, max innings ever in his career was 139. So we very much don't think he's going to go much above that. So they're great. I can tell you that Glasnow is going to shoot up like crazy if he looks good in spring, because I mean, I took him second round in a high stakes league last year, and it was great until it wasn't. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy that by the time we get to, we go to Vegas every year for the NFBC, live drafts and the auctions and everything. And by that point, if it's just like, regular old Glasnow, we're all going to buy in again. It's just, it is what it is. And he'll be up there, in the Snell range, I'm sure. Sasaki is a guy that I'm a little higher on than the market. I've been drafting him no problem in the 70s and 80s. Part of that is because I feel like I can manage if, there are weeks that he's out, especially in deeper leagues. I can, kind of use my, I guess, expertise or whatever to like stream in the right way. But when I get those Sasaki starts, they should be, pretty solid. But then there's also you don't want to compound risk too much. So if you like, hey, I decide I want to take a shot on Jacob deGrom, and then I want to get, Sasaki and Glasnow. It's, that altogether probably isn't a good idea, but kind of, pick who the guy you're going for and just, go all in.
Makes sense. And yeah, I mean, Glasnow, he could be a steal if he stays healthy, no doubt about it. This is my opinion. I'm sure it's a lot of people's opinions. You can get the aces and all that in the early rounds, and they're predictable. But I feel like a lot of times you win your fantasy leagues by getting the guys in the later rounds. And a good example last season, up until he got hurt, Gavin Stone was someone that I'm sure was
Mhm.
going very late in the drafts, and you were drafting a very solid middle of the rotation guy. Me, on the other hand, I was that idiot that made the mistake of drafting Bobby Miller in like round 3 or 4 because I was high on him. I thought we were getting another Spencer Strider on our hands, and he was the worst pitcher in baseball
Mhm.
statistically. And now he's probably going to be deeper in the drafts, but you've got your Bobby Millers, the Tony Gonsolins, the Dustin Mays, Landon Knack, etc. Any of these guys stick out to you that could be kind of a true value maker?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, uh, I've always been a fan of Gonsolin. He's one of those guys. He's always outperformed his peripherals, meaning his ERAs, whips, always like lower than it should be. He just pitches really well, knows how to pitch, but obviously it has been a while. So I'm okay with him. He's not particularly a target for me, but I'll be honest, I really like Bobby Miller, especially at the price. I mean, we're talking, he's not even being drafted in 12-team leagues. Everybody is burned. And if there's any sort of huge lesson, kind of pick up, I guess, from this today in fantasy is to, for the listeners, is to not let last season's results kind of impact you too much. I mean, we're not talking about Bobby Miller in the third or fourth now. We're talking about, Bobby Miller in the 30th or whatever it is. This is a guy that has been dominant, elite at every level throughout his entire life, including his first season in the majors. And then last year happened, and it happened. He was hurt. He had issues, probably maybe some, in his head. There were a lot of things going on. It was awful. And so a lot of people are going to be like, oh, never again. I'm out. I want no part of it. But it's free, right? It's like, and I personally think he's gonna win that last rotation spot, and I think he's gonna stick around so long as he's healthy. There's always the concern, dude throws 9,900. If he's doing that again, those guys always, many of them just, their arms go out, and TJ again, and this and that. It's always a risk, but there's very little risk when you're talking about a potential Dodger starter who's an elite, pitcher as a rookie, and you're getting him basically for free.
Yeah, love that. It's like last season, had River Ryan, 5 starts, got Tommy John surgery. That sucked. Yeah. Big blow. Thought I had something good there. Are there any other Dodgers starters didn't mention that are worth drafting, or did we kind of cover that?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, I always love, you love Dustin May. We all want to see him succeed. But from what I understand, I think they want to probably use him in like a, multi-inning relief role, maybe piggyback him and kind of, work him back that way. So I don't think he's going to be, starting out the gate, but he's, somebody to watch. And again, he's like, post 400 ADP, and all these names are going to pop up at some point, unless it's like perfection and the top 4 stay healthy. But otherwise you're going to see a lot of these guys come up, like, Michael Grove, Landon Knack, Kasparius, like, these guys will all be a part of our lives at some point this year.
All right, we'll quickly pivot to the bullpen real quick, because that's another big driver for fantasy sports. I've moved away from saves. I kind of find it lame. I do net saves holds now, just to get the best cream of the crop with all the relief pitchers out there. Generally speaking, Tanner Scott's probably the most aggressive pick, I'm guessing, because he's expected to get the bulk of the saves. Any other Dodgers relievers? I mean, the answer is going to be yes, but any other Dodgers relievers worth maybe being a little more aggressive on, in your opinion?
So first of all, just like a little fun story, as the NFBC have these leagues called the Gladiators, and they're 23-round drafts with no bench. So whoever you get, it's, and so when you're drafting this in November or December, you're playing with fire with, guessing who the closers are. So of course I've got, Kirby Yates and Blake Trinan on the same team, that I drafted in November. So, then you thought Yates was going to sign somewhere else where he would actually get saves. You thought Tanner Scott, nobody thought he was going to sign with the Dodgers. You thought, Trinan had a really good shot at it. Now, they're cannibalizing each other. But, at first, I think 3 weeks ago, I thought it was just going to be an open competition. Not competition, but it would just be like bad for fantasy. Dave Roberts would be like, I have these great guys. Why am I going to, try to just name one guy? But as we've gone through the last couple of weeks, it does seem to me that, based on his quotes, Tanner Scott's kind of the lead. He is the top, lefty there. And then Trinan is going to get some of the important outs as well. And I don't know why he didn't even mention Yates, who was elite last year. And so you've just got a lot of really good options. And Tanner Scott's going like 120 overall, right? And then Blake Trinan is going in the 400s and continuing to slip. And we know how elite he was. We know how great he is when he's healthy. We saw what he did with the A's when, was the best closer in baseball like 5 years ago. So that's a buying opportunity. If you're in deep leagues or you're just kind of scouring the waivers, like, who's to say, even though they paid Tanner Scott all those millions, and Kirby Yates is older, what if Tanner Scott goes to what happens to him 2 years ago, where in Miami, where he just, lost control and just, whatever. And then, hey, who's Mr. Dependable there for you? Blake Trinan stepping in and getting saved. So I really like him for where he's going.
Sounds good. All right, before we get into just general NOS talk quickly, You're a Dodgers fan. I already mentioned that. We just won the World Series. So, Vlad, I don't know if you've been on other Dodger podcasts before, but want to get your thoughts on the Dodgers as a whole. What are they ruining baseball? Are is it other people's bitching out of line? Do we feel great that we could be the next dynasty in baseball? So, let's hear how you feel about the Dodgers.
I'm happy. I mean, that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And even like, fandom aside, there are a lot of really smart baseball fans that they just have common sense, and they might be from Pittsburgh or lower market teams. And instead of piling on the Dodgers for what they're doing, they are hard on their own ownership for like, hey, you guys are billionaires or whatnot, millionaires, like spend some money, do things differently, right? Like what Artie Moreno is doing, and with the Angels is, yeah, sure, he's spending some money, but like, there are a lot of joke franchises, and the Dodgers are the model of what you should be doing. They're just like on elite level in every way. And so good for baseball, bad for baseball, whatever it is, we're all still going to be watching. So I have no issue with it whatsoever.
It's just funny to me how these fans make these complaints when the facts point out that a lot of these players just fall into the Dodgers' laps. Mookie Betts, for example, the Red Sox didn't want to pay him. Why
Yeah.
they didn't want to pay a top 3 player in the sport who was being compared to Mike Trout basically at the time? Good for us, because that's on the Red Sox, not the Dodgers spending. Freddie Freeman, the Braves decided they wanted to move on from Freddie Freeman. They wanted Matt Olson, who's a good baseball player himself, but they haven't won a World Series with Matt Olson yet. Freddie Freeman, they did just win a World Series with at the time. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, another one. The Yankees could have easily outbid the Dodgers, but they didn't want to rub Garrett Cole's ego the wrong way. They said Garrett Cole has to be our highest paid pitcher. Guess you're going to the Dodgers. And then Shohei Ohtani, yeah, he chose the Dodgers ultimately, but Artie Moreno at the end of the day chose not to make a competitive bid for his, at the time, franchise marquee player. So I don't know what these delusional thoughts are, but I just had to get that out there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And my new thing is like, I'm just not giving negative energy my attention. Let's just keep crushing it. Let's win the World Series and build a dynasty.
All right, so last topic. Obviously, the Dodgers are really good. We all know that. NL West, there is always going to be a few players in our division that stick out. And from a fantasy perspective, maybe you don't want to root for them, but it's probably wise to get them on your team. So, Vlad, was curious if there's anyone in the NL West that you're very high on, or you feel is undervalued, or names that you're targeting.
Yeah, I mean, one name that isn't necessarily a value because he's going in the first round, but Corbin Carroll on the Diamondbacks, I feel is going to be, absolutely elite this season. I think he can challenge for being a top 3 overall player. A couple other guys get hurt, and he's up there. I mean, this is a guy that can steal 50 bases. He had such a bad first half. I mean, he was hitting under 200 for a while. One of the best players in the second half, but he still scored over 100 runs. He's still hitting home runs. I mean, he's just a stud. So if you have a middle first round pick, I think Corbin Carroll is really strong. I think the Giants, who is a team I usually don't target unless it's for pitching, I think that their closer, Ryan Walker, is a really good pick. And if you're playing on like, Yahoo, CBS, ESPN on these sites, a guy like that could be buried down in their ADP. And so, he's really, he's a guy that can be a top 5 closer, and also, elite ratios. I'm not too worried about Camilo Doval stealing that job again. So I think he's solid. And then Jung-Hoo Lee on, the Giants as well. He pretty much missed all of last season, but he's another just, elite batting average, a little bit of everything, probably going to hit third, not a big power guy, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be a lot of runs and RBIs for him, steals a few bases as well. If you're looking at the Padres, I think there are a couple of good deals there too. I think because the Padres are still looking to shop their closer and trade him, Robert Suarez. I think Jason Adam or maybe even Jeremiah Estrada could be like, somebody to really keep an eye on. Those two are really good. And, Jason Adam, if he steps into that full-time role, he's another guy that can be a top 10 closer. And then, AJ Puck on the Diamondbacks is, right now the market leans towards Justin Martinez. And, to be honest, AJ Puck is a little bit of a better, he's just a better pitcher overall. Better control and everything. And Torey Lovullo, their manager, is in his quotes. Anytime you hear him quote something, he's always kind of mentioning puck first. So they still might add somebody. If they add a Kyle Finnegan, it's going to really screw things up over there. But I think he's solid. And then, last guy I'll mention is Nick Pivetta. I think him going from Boston to Petco is incredible. He'll have some tough starts when he faces us. It'll be rough, I'm sure. But overall, starts at home against the Rockies, starts against the Pirates at home, things like that. I mean, he's going, I think, around 200 ADP, and I've got him probably 60 spots higher than that. So if Pavetta's available in any of your leagues, I would scoop him up.
Figured Nick Pivetta was going to come up because I've been thinking about him too. Like, the stuff has never matched the stats. Like, he has really good stuff, but then the stats, you would look at him and you're like, this guy's mediocre. But going to Petco, that could be a big difference maker. So I agree full-heartedly with the Nick Pivetta call. Corbin Carroll had him last season, got burned, traded him, and then obviously, like you mentioned, broke out in the second half. That was annoying. AJ Puck, love him too. I feel like he's pretty much close to that Tanner Scott, Josh Hader tier, and he might do that this season and break out. Corbin Burns, we didn't talk about him, but newly signed with the D-backs. He's probably in that range of, he's just a safe guy to have, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Corbin Burns, he's the only pitcher. He's basically been the most consistent top-end pitcher, well, him and Wheeler. But Burns is the only pitcher to basically earn $20 or more in just like standard fantasy 15 team, $20 or more in 5 straight seasons. That's from Ron Chandler from HQ. But yeah, I mean, Corbin Burns is elite. There will be, he's not really focused on strikeouts. He's not like, if somebody's worried about, the strikeouts aren't as elite as the other guys, Snell or others in that range, it doesn't matter. You're going to get some consistent starts. It was tough to pitch in Baltimore in that park last year, and he still did a good job. And so, I think he'll be just fine in Arizona. And
then last and least, the Colorado Rockies. So they're just there.
They're just there. They're going to be guys that we stream at home on occasion. I think if you're like in a super deep league, a dude like Hunter Goodman is, somebody that can pop 20 home runs because he's a catcher eligible guy in most formats, but he'll play some in the outfield and, maybe hurt the batting average a little, but he's all right. And then, I mean, dude, if you want to talk really deep, I've been doing these 50-round draft and holds on NFBC, and I'm getting Kyle Farmer, former Dodger, in the 45th of every draft, eligible at second and third. He'll hit against all lefties. Like, I guess he's fitting really, well in, like, club leader already on the team, and he's not an awful hitter. So I think that's another interesting guy. And then Chris Bryant, I don't know if we can even talk about him. Whoever knows what's going to be with Chris Bryant.
I do wonder if Ezekiel Tovar will eventually break out, but I guess that's another one to just wait on.
Yeah, he's been just he just produces because he's, near the top of the lineup, but he's one of those guys that the stats are there, but the underlying stuff, if you look at, he's always got one of the highest chase rates in baseball, like low walk rate, like one of those guys that could just crumble at any time.
All right. Well, Vlad, you can follow him on social media. Make sure to give him a follow at RotoGut. We really appreciate you coming on, and going to give you the last opportunity to let the people know where they can follow your work and get aboard FTN Fantasy if they're interested.
Yeah, well, first, Kevin, thanks for having me on. When you invited me, I'm like, the Incline Dodgers podcast. I'm in. I want to talk to the people. Yeah, I mean, ftnfantasy.com is a site. It is basically the best place for fantasy baseball content. We are constantly updating based on spring training news, everything from our rankings, projections, several times a day. We are the place that helps anyone win. I mean, we help high stakes winners win, so we can of course help people that are a little bit more casual and aren't as serious. Like, you basically just draft off of our rankings and crush it. But ftnfantasy.com, the MLB package is very reasonable, and actually you can use code SPRING15. That'll get you 15% off. But it's a good deal. It'll pay off in the preseason on its own. So that's it.
Cool. I'll drop that below in the description link. Get people aboard FTN Fantasy. Well, Vlad, thank you so much for joining the Incline Dodgers today. Hit that like button and that subscribe button if you're on the audio feed. Leave us a review and let us know what you guys do end up doing for fantasy baseball. But we're going to close out the show now. Appreciate all you guys listening. We'll be back with some more Dodgers talk.